Ooh, what decks did I pick? Ooh, so many decks to choose from. Ooh la la. Ooh, what's this? So cute! Wind-ups!
Having trouble choosing a deck? Have no fear! Captain Saber Scrub is here.
Really, Jesse?
What's up everybody in YuGiOh YouTube land? This is Jesse Byrne representing Team FTK, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the decks in this format that are competitive. And I know we're not usually a competitive channel. We usually like to focus on more of the rogue anti-meta play styles that aren't really meta, but I wanted to talk about the decks in this format in particular because there are so many viable decks right now that you guys can pick from. And if you guys want to play competitively, or if you don't want to play competitively, either way you can play these decks because it's such a versatile format. And I've picked out at least like 10 decks right now that I think work really well in this format, and I wanted to talk to you guys about them. Also, before I get into this video, I wanted to make a quick disclaimer that the ban list is supposed to be here sometime very soon. So if any decks on this list get, like slaughtered on the ban list, I want to go ahead and just say, be aware that this video is being recorded pre-ban list, so if Sky Strikers gets wrecked on the ban list, there's always going to be other options. So also guys, if you like this video, please make sure to leave a big thumbs up, click the bell for more notifications. Make sure to check us out on PayPal and Patreon if you guys want to contribute to the channel to help us produce better videos and all that other good stuff. Also, if you guys want to get a good custom playmat or any other type of gaming merchandise, click the link in the description for Inked Gaming. Enter the promo code TEAMFTK10 to get 10% off your order today. So I want to go ahead and start off. The first deck I want to talk about is Sky Strikers. It's probably the best deck on this list, and the best deck this format is Sky Strikers. And it's really, really good. It's a control-based deck, and a lot of cards are on the chopping board, so to speak, for the ban list, because they have cards like multi-roll, which is really good, and they have cards like Widow Anchor, which basically lets you take your opponent's monsters. And they're actually one of the decks that doesn't use a lot of monsters. You only run Ray, and you run 3 hand traps. And that deck is probably going to be the best deck that you guys can pick up, honestly, in my opinion. I think it's the best deck that we've had in a long time. And it's one of those decks where it's crazy unfair because of how consistent it is, but at the same time it's not too hard to beat because they don't end their board with like 6 negates or anything like that. And it's one of those decks where if you pick it up and you play it, you're probably going to top a lot. Locally for sure, you might top regionally depending on how good of a player you are, and you might be able to just go ahead and win a YCS or win a regionals with the deck because it's such a good consistent deck. Now I know it might get hit, but this isn't like a ban list video. It's more of just a disclaimer that I'm trying to explain that if this deck gets hit and you guys pick it up, I'm sorry. But I want to say be aware of that factor that the deck might get hit really bad and that it might not be as competitive. But I want to say even if they hit like one of their cards like Engage to 1 or something like that, I still see the deck being very competitive. But if they completely just neuter the deck and take away a lot of mechanics, it won't be. But I think that Sky Strikers in general is probably still the best deck this format, pre-ban list speaking. And there's also 2 more decks that are, like part of the big 3, which is like we have our 3 best decks in the format, and then we also have the decks that are like really viable. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about Solemn Ingrate. Solemn Ingrate is a link deck that has a lot of plays that disrupt your opponent with their counter trap card, and they're able to get a lot of resources back from the graveyard with Sunlight Wolf. And they're a really strong deck. They have link plays, and then they also have XYZ plays because they can make their big fire guy. He's a rank 3 XYZ monster, and he's really good. And He kind of looks like the Pokemon, the evolved form of Ponyta. He looks like that thing. Rapidash. There'll be a picture of Rapidash right here. Rapidash. So yeah, he looks like Rapidash, and he lets you do a bunch of cool stuff. And it's a cheap deck for the most part because, of course, Yu-Gi-Oh is expensive with, you know, having cards like Infinite Impermanence, but the deck primarily is cheap because you can get 3 structure decks and it comes with 3 Ash Blossoms. You make your money back with the 3 structure decks. But all you really need is like 3 Lady D-Bugs. They're like $8 a piece. Last time I checked, they might have went down. They might have went up. Don't quote me on that. But they're really easy to get. The deck is really easy to get. And it's probably going to be one of your cheaper audiences. I almost said audiences, but it's going to be one of your cheaper options because if you're looking at a deck like Sky Strikers, Engages are still expensive. If you're looking at a deck like Thunder Dragons, Colossus is still like $50 last time I checked, I believe. And I feel like Solomon Great is still one of those powerful decks that we're going to see top for a very long time in this format. And they're getting new support and they're getting more cards. And I think they're getting like a Link 3 monster that's really good. And they have basically everything you would want to pick up in a deck, and I think you'll definitely get regional tops, you'll definitely get local tops, you could get YCS tops. It just depends on the type of player you are. But if you're coming into the game and you basically want to know what decks to pick up, Solomon Great is a great option because it's really cheap. See what I did there? Great option. So another deck that I wanted to talk about is Thunder Dragons, which is like really cool because there's so many different variations of the deck. You can play it with Dangers. You can play it pure, which I've seen top regionals before, more before than nowadays. It tops more nowadays with mixtures of like Chaoses and Dangers, but it's still a really good deck. It's going to be expensive, but basically their best boss monster, his name is Colossus, and he's a walking Thunder King that has built-in protection. He's a really good boss monster. So if you guys ever played Yu-Gi-Oh like back in the day, you quit playing and then you were like, hey, I want to come back into the game, what's a good deck? Thunder Dragons is definitely really good. Just sit on Colossus and win the game, and then you can. And then there's other variations of the Thunder Dragon deck where you can run like Light and Darkness Dragons and Guard Dragons and things like that, which is really cool. But you can also run XYZs and run like Zombie Stein to have another negate on board. And it's just a really powerful deck because you're able to manipulate things like not letting your opponent search, built-in protection just by like banishing a monster in graveyard, which is really good. And it's one of those decks where it's like, I want to control my opponent, I don't want them to search, I want to put out a big boss monster and just sit on him and just slowly render my opponent useless. And it has a great matchup against other decks, like it has a great matchup against Sky Strikers, it has a great matchup against Solomon Great. It tops YCSs, it tops locals, it tops regionals. And if you guys are thinking, well, you know, some of these cards are really expensive, you know, that's part of being in the competitive scene, unfortunately. But if you guys are new to the game and you want to play something other than just a budget-friendly deck and you guys want to play, you know, a expensive deck, if you guys have the money and have the resources and you don't want to play Solomon Great, Thunder Dragons is a good option. And I was talking about before how you could mix it with Dangers, so I'll go ahead and segue my way into Dangers. They should have never been made, but they are probably one of the most consistent decks, consistent engines right now running in Yu-Gi-Oh! They're very expensive as well, but the main thing about them is that they are all built-in upstart goblins. So basically what Dangers do, for players who are not familiar, that's kind of the whole purpose of this video, is for players who are not familiar. You basically reveal your danger monster in hand, and then you shuffle your hand randomly. Basically, your opponent picks a card out of your hand, and you discard a card, and then if it's not the card they chose, you get to special summon that monster. So basically, you reveal like a Jackalope, your opponent picks another card out of your hand, you special summon Jackalope, and then you get to draw a card. So they're all built-in upstart goblins, and that's really problematic for the game. So these cards could be hit because there's a lot of controversy surrounding them, but there's so many of them, and they're like TCG exclusive, and they're going to get like a whole bunch of more support. So it's going to be the type of thing where these cards could never be hit, but they also help other archetypes, such as like Luna Lights at a recent YCS that won the event, like 2 YCSs ago. It won the event, and he was piloting it with Dangers, and Dangers is the type of archetype that can just be splashed into almost anything. I'm not going to say like you can go ahead and say, oh, splash into Yosenju's and it's going to be tier 1. They don't work good together. Splash into Burning Abyss and you're going to win everything. No, but they are very versatile and you can splash them into anything. But you can also make them with pure versions. They do promote a lot of FTKs, so you can play like Cyberstein variations, and you can play like a lot of other different things with the deck. And it just makes this crazy deck because you can play like Beginning of the End, and you get to like banish 5 dark monsters and draw 2 cards is really good. And they can also run Allure of Darkness, and they have their own like spells and traps that are really good that make it where you can't like respond to their summons and things like that. So Dangers is like, it really shouldn't exist, but it's one of those decks that if you guys want to be competitive and you want to play something that isn't, you know, Sky Strikers, and you want to be able to just like spit out a bunch of monsters, make a bunch of link plays, draw a bunch of cards, Dangers is definitely the deck for you. And another deck that has been popping up that's a mixture with Dangers is Orchestras. Now, I don't really know a lot about Orchestras, to be honest, so I'm not going to sit here and explain all these orchestra combos and everything, but I just want to go ahead and give them like a side note. They're primarily mixed in with Dangers, so I want to give them like a little side caption here and just go ahead and talk about them. Basically, they have graveyard effects, and they're machines, which is really cool. They're dark, so you can use Allure of Darkness, you can use Beginning of the End, splash them in with Dangers, and they get their graveyard effects off faster. It's one of those types of decks where it's like really under the radar, but it's like slowly creeping up and getting tops mixed with Dangers and mixed with other things. So Orchestras is like right there as a good competitive deck, but it just feels like it's missing 1 or 2 cards for it to play it purely on its own. It's better mixed with Dangers. So one of my favorite decks right now in this format that I don't think is going to get hit on the ban list, and I think is still a really amazing deck, is Trickstars. And Trickstars is a control deck that also utilizes burn, and it also utilizes link spam. So the main thing about Trickstars that makes them more broken than almost anything else is reincarnation. You get to banish your opponent's entire hand, they draw the same number, and then it becomes really deadly with Draw and Lockbird. You chain Draw and Lockbird, you make it where your opponent doesn't get to draw, they banish their whole hand, and then you just bring out your pretty little chicks and attack for game. So that is why reincarnation is so good, but it's also really good in the graveyard because you get to banish it to special summon a Trickstar monster from your graveyard, and there's a lot of combos with the deck, and there's a lot of cool things you can do. Like, if you guys want to run a burn version of the deck, it's not the most viable thing ever, but you can run like Darkroom and Nightmare, burn your opponent out, and you can also link off because they have really strong link monsters. They have Holly Angel, and she's really busted. Basically, every time a Trickstar monster is special summoned to her link zone, or special summon in general, one or the other, she burns for 200. So in combination with Light Stage, that's another 200 damage that they burn for. So that's also really good. And then they have their own link monsters like Holly Angel, and you can play the deck a lot of different ways. You can play it the burn variation like I mentioned before. You can play like a control version with like Eater of Millions and like Torrential Tribute to blow your opponent out. You can also play like a Floodgate version with playing like Rivalry of the Warlords and Gozen Match, and you can play it almost any way. You can play it with Sky Strikers even if you want to fuse the 2 decks together. You can play a Sky Striker Trickstar deck, but they're all really, really good at what they do. And when I say they, I mean Lilybell, Candina, and Lycoris. Those are the main ones. And there's like Trickstar Caravan that just came out. That's really good. So the new support helps Trickstars and helps them do what they do best, which is basically just control the field and also disrupt your opponent. And you can play them with artifacts. And the deck came out like a year or 2 ago, and it's still getting tops, especially with artifacts built in, with Trap Trick having the power to be able to search out your infinite impermanence if you can play them, and being able to search out your reincarnation, being able to search out your artifact sanctum, which is really good. So Trickstars definitely holds a place in my heart as one of those decks where I picked up and I was like, hey, this deck's awesome. I love the fact that they can burn. I love the fact that they can link spam. I love the fact that they can OTK. Such a versatile deck. Speaking of OTKs, we need to talk about Cyber Dragons, because they are a deck that is very underrated, but they did get a recent top out of YCS, and they are so focused on OTKing, and they have great synergy with being able to fusion summon over your opponent's monsters with contact fusion. So basically you can give your opponent a machine kaiju type monster, special summon it to their side of the field by tributing it, then you can special summon your Cyber Dragon, contact fusion into a bigger Cyber Dragon, and attack for game. Really good stuff. It's one of those decks that has always been under the radar in a way. It's a really, really old deck. Cyber Dragons have been around for a long time. They got a structured deck like a long time ago. It wasn't very great. Recently, I think it was the set before Savage Strike, they got some really good support, and now they're able to shine a little bit more, but I don't think enough people are playing them. But it's one of those types of decks where they are a very heavy machine deck. And another thing that's great about running machines is that liminal removal is back at 3. So you're able to go for those hardcore OTKs even more, and being able to power bond and bring out a huge monster, attack your opponent's monster, hit them with that liminal removal, double your machine attack monster, and then you have like an 8,000 attack monster, and you're able to just crush your opponent's dreams. And not only that, Cyber Dragon Infinity is really a good card. Like, it's really one of those cards where at a time frame it shouldn't have been around, but that's a whole nother story because we have like other cards that are banned now, and it's still a good card. Cyber Dragon Infinity is awesome, and the fact that you can make another negate in the deck, you can mix it with Galaxy Soldiers and be able to make those Cyber Dragons faster is really cool. It's one of those decks that I think should top more, but it's unfortunately under the radar. But it's definitely one of the more roguish style decks on this list. Speaking of roguish style decks, we have Subterrors, Guru Control, whatever you want to call them. The deck is very much cancerous, and it's very much my kind of play style, but it's also the type of deck that is just killing the meta because it's able to abuse floodgates like, of course, Gojin Match, Rivalry of the Warlords, those type of things. But its main one that it uses is there can only be one. So there can only be one basically says you can only control one type. So, for example, if your opponent's playing Trickstars, they normal summon, their fairy type monster, Candina. You flip there can only be one. They can't go into Lycris. They can't have, more than one of that type. So they can't have more than one fairy on the field, which is really good. And it basically makes it where your opponent is limited to just playing one monster, and you're able to just go off and control the field, which is really good. And that's one of those cards that slows down a lot of decks like Solomon Great, and you have to rely on just using fire types, for example, just using light types, things like that. And Guru Control is taking spots, many spots at regionals, many spots at YCSs. So you guys should definitely look into Guru Control, Subterrors, and pick it up. They have a really good field spell that lets them search. It's really busted. We probably should have got the Guru a long time ago, but I feel like now the deck can shine a little more. It's not going to be the best deck, that's why I mentioned the 3 decks at the beginning. Those are probably the best decks this format, debatably. But Guru Control is one of those decks that is sneaking in those tops because it's so able to control your opponent and just disrupt their plays and stop them dead in their tracks and control them out. So the next deck that I wanted to talk about, the next to last deck, I only have like 2 more decks I want to talk about, is Dinosaurs. So Dinosaurs is a really awesome deck that came out like a year or 2 ago, around that time, maybe even. And another thing that makes Dinosaurs so broken is Ultimate Conductor Tyranna. He's basically the big boss monster of the deck. He has 3,500 attack. He can swing at all your opponent's monsters. He has a destroy a monster on field or hand effect to Book of Eclipse the whole field during either player's turn. It's really, really good, and his summoning condition is only by banishing 2 dinosaur-type monsters in your graveyard, but you can also use the evolution pill to bring him out, which is another really, really good card. You just banish a non-dinosaur type monster and a dinosaur type monster from your hand or graveyard to special summon Conductor from deck, or you can special summon Quadralus from deck, or you can special summon Pankratops. Evolution Pill is a really, really good card, and Dinosaurs are just one of those decks that's just so under the radar, even though they have had recent tops, such as one of the more recent ARGs, they got top cut, and he was playing like a Kaiju control build, which was really cool with like Gamecill to just negate, and it's not once per turn, it's like equal to as many counters that you have on the Waterfront, which is really good, which is the field spell for Kaijus. So Dinosaurs are really awesome, and there's a lot of different variations, which you guys will see on the channel soon, because we're going to be updating. We're going to be having a Shadal version, we're going to be having a updated Lost World, we're going to be having a True King version of Dinosaurs, so look forward to seeing a lot of Dinosaur deck profiles, not from me, because I'm not the Dinosaur player of the team. We have my lovely fiance Destiny Byrne, who is just so good with Dinosaurs, and she's just really amazing at making all different kind of builds with that deck. So expect to see everything from True Kings, Lost Worlds, Shadals, Kaijus coming very soon from the Dino Queen herself. So another thing that I really like about Dinosaurs is that the consistency factor is amazing. You can basically just search out anything with your Fossil Dig, and you can also search out with your Oviraptor. So it's one of those decks that just needs a little more of a push to be tier 1. It's like one of those tier 2 decks that has amazing cards going for it, and it's able to just destroy the meta. And it's one of those decks that is still very viable this format. And yeah, they need Miscellaneous Saurus, probably to 2 or 3 copies. We don't have that worm guy messing everything up like we used to, or that other worm guy messing everything up like we used to. So Miscellaneous could come back, and it could make Dinosaurs even more stronger, and probably push it to tier 1 status. So the last deck that I want to talk about on this list is Necrosis. So Necrosis is a very consistent ritual deck. It has a lot of cards that search other cards, and it's basically 2 main mechanics, are searching and special summoning these powerful monsters, and being able to just have big cool plays like Trishula, the Ice Barrier, a Necrosis one. It's the one that looks just like the Ice Barrier one, because they're all kind of like based off the Ice Barriers. But Trish is really good because being able to banish a card from your opponent's field, hand, and graveyard is really good. Nobody likes being Trished. They have a lot of things going for them. I believe it was Brynag just got recently put up to 3, so that's really cool. And they got their Strategist back, so the Strategist is really good. And there's always possibilities for more cards to come off of the list to make the deck even stronger. I know we got announcement of some reprints, but there's also other cards that came out recently. I believe in Savage Strike, and the set before that there was the Incantation Monsters, and they support ritual archetypes, which is really cool. So if you guys want to play Necrosis this format, they have had multiple tops at regionals. Look up top 8 regionals for Necrosis, and you'll find 2019 and 2018. You'll find that they've been topping. They bubbled at YCSs. I don't think they made it to top 32, but they definitely got really close and almost making it to top 32, which is really cool. And Necrosis is one of those decks where I feel like I personally don't like them, because during that format I was playing Yosenjus, and you know, they had a lot of trouble dealing with 3 Vanity's Emptiness. They had a lot of trouble dealing with Thunder King, and that was what I did, was just beat Necrosis all day long with Yosenjus. So personally, I don't like the deck, but I feel like if you guys want a ritual deck that's really cool, that can make huge power plays, and that can control your opponent, Necrosis is definitely the deck for you. So if you guys liked this video, make sure to please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Let us know what you guys think. If this video helped you, please leave that big thumbs up, ring the bell for more notifications, and all that other good stuff. There's a lot of great links in the description. Please make sure to check them out, and let us know what type of content you guys would like to see. If you guys want to see me talk more about these cards, if you guys want to see some more deck profiles, what you guys would like to be interested in seeing, please let me know. This was Jesse Byrne representing Team FTK, out.